Daniel always liked strange things. While most people spent their money on fancy houses, new cars, or the latest phones, Daniel searched for odd deals online. He wasn't rich, but he enjoyed finding little surprises that nobody else cared about. One evening, as he scrolled through a forgotten auction site, he stopped suddenly. The listing read, "Cabin in the forest, 12 cents. At first he thought it was a scam. How could anyone sell a cabin for only 12 cents? That was less than the price of chewing gum. He rubbed his eyes, refreshed the page, and looked again. It was real. The picture showed an old wooden cabin, hidden deep in a forest with moss on the roof and broken windows. Most people would ignore it. But Daniel felt a spark of curiosity. Why would someone practically give it away, he wondered. He clicked buy before he could change his mind. The next morning, an email confirmed the deal. The cabin was now his. He laughed as he read it. Well, he muttered, this might be the strangest purchase I've ever made. The journey to the cabin wasn't easy. It was far from the city, hidden behind dirt roads and thick trees. Daniel drove as far as his old truck could take him, then walked the rest of the way with a backpack full of supplies. The forest was quiet, almost too quiet. No birds sang and no insects buzzed. The deeper he went, the heavier the air felt, as if the trees themselves were watching him. By the time he reached the clearing, the sun was already low. There it was. The cabin looked even worse than the photo. The wood was dark with age. The roof sagged, and vines crept up the sides like green snakes. The windows were dusty, and one of the doors hung loose on its hinges. Daniel stood in front of it, hands on his hips. 12 cents well spent, he joked to himself. But something inside his chest felt unsettled. He pushed open the door. It groaned loudly, echoing through the empty room. Dust floated in the sunlight that leaked through broken shutters. The air smelled old, like damp wood and forgotten years. Inside, there was only simple furniture, a table, 2 chairs, and a cracked fireplace. The floor creaked under his boots. For a moment, he thought maybe the place was just abandoned. Maybe the strange price was because nobody wanted to fix it. But then he heard it, a sound. It was soft, almost like breathing. Not his own, not the wind. A slow rhythm, deep and steady. His heart skipped. He turned in circles, searching the shadows. "Hello?" he called out, his voice shaking. No answer. Only that strange sound coming from above. His eyes darted to a narrow ladder leading up to the loft. He hesitated, gripping his flashlight. Every sensible thought told him to leave, to walk away and never come back. But curiosity was stronger. Step by step he climbed the ladder. The wood groaned and dust fell into his hair. When his head finally reached the loft, the beam of his flashlight froze on something impossible. A figure. At first, Daniel thought it was a mannequin or some strange statue left behind. But no, it was alive. A girl. No, not just a girl. A giant. She hung suspended in the air, her head almost brushing the ceiling beams. Strange ropes or vines bound her wrists and ankles, holding her in place like she was trapped in sleep. Her long silver hair shimmered even in the dim light, falling like a river around her shoulders. Her skin was pale with faint glowing lines across it, like patterns carved by stars. Daniel's mouth went dry. He almost dropped the flashlight. She was beautiful and frightening all at once. Not human, not anything he had ever seen before. Her chest rose and fell with slow breaths. She wasn't dead. She was alive. He stumbled back, nearly falling off the ladder. His mind raced. What is this? Who is she? Why is she here? For a long moment he couldn't move. He only stared, frozen between fear and wonder. Finally, he whispered, to himself, This can't be real." He climbed fully into the loft, though his knees trembled. The girl didn't react. Her eyes were closed, her expression calm, almost peaceful, as if she was dreaming. The strange bindings around, her pulsed faintly like they were alive too. Daniel reached out with a shaking hand but stopped inches away. Touching her felt dangerous, yet leaving her like this felt wrong. "Who are you?" he murmured. "Of course." She gave no answer. The air around her felt charged, like electricity before a storm. Daniel's skin prickled, and the cabin seemed to hum quietly, as if the walls themselves responded to her presence. He wanted to run. He wanted to shout. He wanted to believe he was hallucinating. But he couldn't look away. The longer he watched, the more questions filled his head. Was she trapped by someone? Or was she something that had fallen from the sky? Why was she in this forgotten cabin sold for only 12 cents? It felt like the cabin had been nothing more than a cage, and he had walked right into a secret he was never meant to see. The sun outside dipped lower, painting the forest in red light. Shadows stretched across the floor. Daniel realized he had been standing there for nearly an hour, unable to decide what to do. He backed away slowly, his mind still racing. He climbed down the ladder and collapsed into one of the dusty chairs, pressing his hands to his face. "This is insane," he muttered. "What did I just buy?" But deep inside, he knew the answer. He hadn't just bought an old cabin for 12 cents. He had stumbled into something extraordinary, something beyond human understanding. And now, he was part of it. That night, as he lay awake on the creaking floor, the memory of the giant alien girl burned in his mind. Her glowing skin, her silent breathing, the strange vines that held her. It all played over and over again. He tried to convince himself to leave in the morning, to pack up and never look back. But he also knew the truth. He couldn't. Because once you see something like that, you can never pretend it doesn't exist. And Daniel's life, whether he liked it or not, had just changed forever. Daniel did not sleep much that night. He tossed and turned on the dusty floor of the cabin, listening to the creaks of the wood and the faint rhythm of the girl's breathing above. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face again. The silver hair, the glowing lines on her skin, the strange way the vines pulsed as though alive. At dawn, sunlight crept through the broken shutters and spilled across the room. Daniel sat up, his eyes heavy but his mind sharper than ever. The questions he had last night were still there, heavier now. Should I free her? Should I call someone? What if she's dangerous? He made coffee on a small stove he had brought with him. As he sipped the bitter drink, he stared at the ladder, leading up to the loft. His heart raced. He had to look again. With slow steps, he climbed up. She was still there, hanging in silence. Her body swayed gently, like she floated in invisible water. The glow of her markings was softer now, almost hidden under the daylight, but she was still breathtaking. Daniel noticed something he had missed the night before. The vines binding her wrists and ankles weren't made of rope or cloth. They looked grown, like roots from the forest itself had reached into the cabin, wrapping around her to hold her in place. When he leaned closer, he saw tiny veins of light moving inside them, like blood inside living tissue. It made his skin crawl. He reached out again, hesitating just before touching one of the bindings. His fingers shook, but curiosity was stronger than fear. He tapped the vine lightly with one finger. The reaction was immediate. The cabin shook. The floorboards groaned loudly. The air filled with a deep hum, almost like the sound of a giant heartbeat. Daniel stumbled back, nearly losing his balance, and then her eyes opened. They glowed, not like human eyes, but like two clear moons lit from within. Silver blue light spilled from them, shining directly into his. Daniel froze. His mouth went dry. The girl inhaled sharply, her chest rising as if she had been underwater for too long. The vines pulsed, then snapped one by one, curling back into the shadows. Her body fell forward. Daniel panicked, stepping back down the ladder, but she landed on the loft floor with surprising grace. For someone so tall and heavy-looking, she moved like a whisper. She crouched low, breathing hard, her glowing eyes darting around the cabin as if searching for enemies. Daniel pressed himself against the wall. His heart thundered in his chest. The girl turned and their eyes met. For a long moment, time stopped. She stared at him with a mix of confusion and fear, her lips parting as if to speak. A strange sound left her throat, soft, melodic, but in no language Daniel understood. I don't know what you're saying, Daniel whispered, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you. Her eyes narrowed. She tilted her head, studying him. Then she took a shaky step forward. The floor creaked under her weight. Daniel felt a surge of panic. She was huge, easily twice his height. If she wanted to, she could crush him. But there was something in her movements that didn't feel threatening. She looked more like someone lost, someone scared. She tried to speak again, but the words came out broken, almost like static. Her hand went to her chest, where the glowing patterns pulsed faintly. Then she tapped her chest and looked at him. Liara, she said slowly. Daniel blinked. Liara, is that your name? She tapped her chest again, repeating, Liara. Daniel pointed to himself. Daniel. For the first time, her face softened. She repeated it carefully. Neil. Hearing her voice form his name made him shiver. It felt surreal, like he had stepped into another world. For a while, they just stood there, exchanging looks and simple gestures. She didn't seem able to say much else, but her tone and expressions carried meaning. She was weak, hungry, and confused. Daniel, despite his fear, felt a strong pull to help her. He climbed down and returned with a bottle of water and some crackers. He wasn't sure if she could eat human food, but he had to try. When he offered them, she sniffed the crackers with suspicion, then nibbled carefully. To his relief, she swallowed without issue. Her glowing eyes softened again, and she gave a small nod, perhaps her way of saying thanks. But peace didn't last long. That night, as darkness fell over the forest, Daniel woke to a strange sound outside. A buzzing, mechanical hum. He sat up quickly, listening. The sound grew louder, moving through the trees. He hurried to the window and peered out. Red lights flashed between the trunks. Not lanterns, not cars, machines. Drones floating low, their sensors scanning the ground. His chest tightened. They were searching for something. No, someone. He looked back at the loft. Liara sat in the shadows, hugging her knees, trembling as if she recognized the sound. Are they looking for you? Daniel whispered. Her glowing eyes met his. Slowly, she nodded. Fear rushed through Daniel's veins, but so did something else. Determination. He couldn't let them find her. She wasn't just some random alien. She was a person, scared and lost. And now, whether he wanted it or not, he was her only ally. The drones hovered closer, their red lights sweeping across the cabin walls. Daniel grabbed a blanket and threw it over the window, hiding the glow from inside. He motioned for Liara to stay quiet. The two of them crouched in silence, listening as the machines buzzed past. Every second felt like an hour. Finally, the hum grew distant, fading into the night. Daniel exhaled shakily. Liara looked at him, her glowing eyes wide with gratitude. Slowly, she reached out a trembling hand. For a second, Daniel hesitated, but then he placed his hand in hers. Her skin was warm, almost electric. The moment their hands touched, something passed between them. Not words, not images, but a feeling. Trust. When dawn arrived, Daniel finally spoke the thought that had been circling in his mind all night. You're not safe here. Whoever they are, they're hunting you. He looked up at her. But you're not alone anymore, I'll help you. Liara tilted her head again, as if trying to understand. Then, with effort, she said softly, Friend. The word broke something inside Daniel. He smiled, even though fear still lingered in his chest. Yeah, friend. And for the first time since buying the cabin, Daniel didn't feel alone either. He had no idea what he had gotten himself into. But deep down, he knew. One thing for certain, his life was no longer ordinary. The cabin wasn't just a home anymore. It was the beginning of something far greater. The morning sun painted the forest in soft gold. Daniel stood outside the cabin, his boots sinking into the damp soil, staring at the endless trees. The night before still echoed in his ears. The buzzing drones, the red lights, the fear that had gripped his chest. He rubbed his temples and whispered, "What have I gotten myself into?" Behind him, the cabin door creaked. Liara stepped out, ducking slightly because the frame was too low for her tall figure. The morning light made her silver hair glisten, and the faint glowing lines on her skin pulsed like living stars. She blinked slowly at the forest, her expression calm but weary. Daniel glanced back at her. "You're not safe here," he said, softly almost to himself. Liara tilted her head, watching him. She didn't understand every word, but she caught enough. Her lips parted, and in her halting, careful voice she repeated a single word she had learned the night before. "Friend." The word settled heavy in Daniel's heart. The day passed slowly, as they tried to understand each other better. Daniel spoke in short words, pointing to things around the cabin. "Tree," he said, touching the rough bark. "Tree," Liara repeated, her accent strange but gentle. He pointed at himself. "Daniel." She smiled faintly, pointing at her chest. "Liara." By the afternoon, she had picked up more words. Water, food, sky, and even safe. It amazed Daniel how quickly she learned, even though she still struggled with longer sentences. Every time she managed to say something right, Daniel found himself smiling. It wasn't just about teaching her. This bond was giving him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Later, Daniel cooked a simple meal, beans and bread. He wasn't sure if alien stomachs could handle it, but Liara ate slowly without trouble. Afterward, she reached into her silver hair and pulled something out. It was a small crystal shard, faintly glowing. She placed it gently in Daniel's palm. He looked at it confused. "What's this?" Liara spoke in her language, soft and melodic, then shook her head as if realizing he didn't understand. She tapped her chest, then tapped the crystal, then pointed at the sky. Daniel studied her gestures. "You came from up there? From the sky?" She nodded once. "And this crystal? Is it from where you're from?" Her eyes softened. She nodded again, then pushed his hand back as if to tell him to keep it. Daniel felt a chill. She had just given him something precious. That night, as the forest grew dark, Liara sat near the fireplace, hugging her knees. Daniel noticed her glowing, eyes dimming slightly like a lantern losing its flame. "You okay?" he asked. She looked at him, her voice quiet. "Cold." Daniel blinked. For the first time, she had spoken a clear word about herself, not just repeating him. He grabbed an old blanket and draped it over her shoulders. It looked tiny on her large frame, but she pulled it closer anyway, giving him a small smile. "Thanks," she whispered, her voice broken but heartfelt. Daniel froze. She had just used another new word. His chest tightened with warmth. She wasn't just learning words. She was learning to trust him. The peace didn't last long. At midnight, a distant hum drifted through the trees. Daniel shot up from his spot near the fire. Liara's eyes widened. She recognized the sound instantly. The drones were back. Daniel rushed to the window. Red lights flickered between the trunks again. He cursed under his breath. They're searching the forest every night now. Liara stood tall, her glowing patterns brightening as if preparing to defend herself. She clenched her fists, but her hands trembled. She wasn't just angry. She was afraid. Daniel turned to her. "We can't fight them head on, we need to hide." She didn't fully understand, but she followed his gestures. Together, they put out the fire and crouched in the corner. The buzzing grew louder. One of the drones hovered near the cabin window, its red light sweeping across the walls. Daniel held his breath, praying it wouldn't detect her glow. Liara pressed against him, curling her body as best she could in the small cabin. He could feel her trembling, her warmth radiating through the blanket. Without thinking, he reached out and placed his hand gently over hers. Her shaking slowed. The drone's red light lingered for a moment longer, then drifted away into the forest. Daniel exhaled. That was close. After the danger passed, Liara sat silently for a long time, staring at the floor. Finally, she whispered in broken English, "They hurt." Daniel frowned. "Who hurt you?" She struggled with words, tapping her temple and then her chest. "Bad ones. Take all." Her voice cracked. "Only me. Left." The meaning hit him like a stone. She wasn't just running. She was the last of her people. Daniel swallowed, hard. He wanted to ask more, but he saw the pain in her glowing eyes. Instead, he simply nodded and said, "Not anymore. You're not alone now." She blinked at him, her lips parting slightly. Then for the first time she leaned closer and rested her head gently against his shoulder. Daniel froze at the weight of her trust. He had never expected this when he bought the cabin. But now, he realized something. He would protect her. No matter what. The next morning, Daniel decided to prepare. If the drones kept coming, they couldn't just hide forever. He set up traps around the cabin, simple ones using ropes, logs, and sharp stakes he carved from fallen branches. Liara watched him curiously, tilting her head at his strange human methods. When he demonstrated one trap, a log swinging down after a rope was tripped, Liara laughed softly. It was the first time Daniel had heard her laugh. The sound was light, almost musical, and it sent shivers down his spine. "You think it's silly?" he teased. She shook her head, still smiling. "Smart." Daniel grinned. She was learning faster now, her words coming smoother each day. That evening, as the traps were ready, the two of them sat outside, watching the stars. Liara pointed at the brightest one in the sky, her glowing eyes reflecting it. "Home," she whispered. Daniel followed her gaze. "That's where you're from?" She nodded, her expression heavy with longing. Daniel didn't know what to say. How could a simple human help someone who belonged among the stars? Yet, when she turned to him and gave a small, hopeful smile, he knew the answer. He would help her not because it was easy, but because she trusted him, and trust was worth everything. As the night deepened, the forest once again filled with the hum of approaching drones. This time, Daniel didn't feel only fear. He felt resolve. He glanced at Liara, who stood tall beside him, her glowing patterns brightening like armor. Together, they were ready. Human cleverness and alien strength, two lives bound by chance now standing against the darkness. And deep in his heart, Daniel knew this bond was no accident. It was destiny. The forest was silent, almost too silent. Daniel stood in the doorway of the cabin, his eyes scanning the dark woods. The traps he had set earlier, swinging logs, pits covered with branches and sharp stakes hidden under leaves, waited like soldiers ready for battle. He knew they would not stop everything, but they might buy time. Behind him, Liara crouched near the fireplace. Her glowing lines flickered brighter whenever the hum of drones echoed through the air. She could sense them before he could hear them. Her eyes were sharp, her tall body tense like a bowstring. "Coming," she whispered in her broken English. Daniel nodded. He gripped the handle of his old axe, the only real weapon he owned. His heart pounded, but his jaw tightened. He wasn't going to run. Not anymore. The buzzing grew louder. Red lights flashed between the trees, weaving like hungry eyes searching the forest floor. This time there were more, at least 10 drones, their movements fast and precise. Daniel's throat went dry. He whispered to Liara, "Stay close." The first drone broke through the trees, its glowing sensors scanning the cabin. Just as it hovered closer, one of Daniel's traps snapped. A heavy log swung down from a rope, smashing the machine against a trunk. Sparks showered the ground as it collapsed in pieces. Liara flinched at the crash, but then her glowing eyes widened with amazement. She looked at Daniel, and for the first time, she smiled during danger. "Smart," she whispered. Daniel gave a short grin, but it quickly vanished as more drones surged forward. 2 of them flew straight toward the cabin. Daniel swung his axe with all his strength, slicing through one. The machine cracked apart, falling to the ground in smoking pieces. But the second drone shot a beam of red light burning across the cabin wall. Wood splintered and caught fire. Daniel cursed, stumbling back. "They're trying to burn us out." Liara rose to her full height, towering above him. Her glowing patterns flared so bright they lit the room like lightning. She raised her hand, and for the first time, Daniel saw her use her alien power. Wave of energy burst from her palm, striking the drone and shattering it mid-air. The sound echoed like thunder. Daniel froze, his eyes wide. "You can fight them." Liara's chest heaved, her expression tight with exhaustion. "Little power," she admitted. "Not strong and long." The battle raged on. More drones broke through the trees, their red beams cutting through branches and grass. One of Daniel's traps caught another, pulling it into a pit where sharpened stakes tore through its metal body. Sparks flew. But 5 more machines surrounded the clearing. Daniel ran outside, dodging a beam that scorched the ground where he had just stood. He swung his axe again, knocking one drone out of the air, but another struck his shoulder with a blast of heat. He cried out, dropping to one knee. Liara's voice rang out behind him. "Daniel!" She dashed forward, faster than he thought possible, for someone her size. With one sweep of her arm, she smashed a drone against a tree. Her glowing lines pulsed wildly, but her movement slowed as exhaustion clawed at her. Daniel forced himself back up. His arm throbbed, but he wouldn't stop. "We have to keep moving. They won't stop until they have you." The drones circled, adjusting their formation. Their mechanical voices hissed in a language Daniel didn't know. Liara's eyes widened in panic. She understood them. "They say, 'Capture alive,'" she whispered, trembling. "Not kill. Take away." Daniel's fists clenched around the axe. "Over my dead body." One of the drones fired a net of glowing wires. Daniel barely rolled aside as it snapped across the ground. Another aimed at Liara, but she tore through it with her glowing hands, shredding the wires like paper. Daniel lunged at one of the drones, swinging with all his strength. His axe split its metal shell, but the force knocked him back. He crashed into the dirt, groaning. The drone aimed its red beam at him, charging. Before it could fire, Liara leapt in front of him. The beam struck her shoulder, burning across her glowing skin. She screamed in pain but stood firm, shielding Daniel. "No!" Daniel shouted, scrambling to his feet. He swung his axe at the drone with fury, smashing it into sparks. Liara collapsed, to one knee, panting heavily. Daniel rushed to her side, gripping her arm. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice breaking. She gave a weak smile. "Friend, protect." The last 2 drones hovered above, circling like vultures. Daniel's traps were all used up, and Liara's glow flickered faintly. They were cornered. Daniel's chest heaved as he stared up at them. His hands trembled, but his eyes burned with determination. He wasn't going to give up. Not now. He looked at the ruined cabin. One last idea struck him. He grabbed a lantern from the wall, lit it, and hurled it into the fire already spreading on the cabin beams. Flames roared higher, smoke billowing into the air. The drones turned toward the blaze, their sensors reacting to the sudden heat. Daniel shouted, "Now, Liara!" With her last strength, Liara thrust her glowing hands forward. A surge of energy exploded from her palms, slamming into the distracted drones. The blast tore them apart in a storm of sparks and fire. The clearing fell silent except for the crackle of flames. Daniel staggered back, gasping for breath. The cabin, his strange 12-cent purchase, was burning to the ground. Liara collapsed, against a tree, her tall body trembling. Her glowing lines dimmed, flickering weakly like a candle ready to go out. Daniel rushed to her side, kneeling beside her. "You're okay," he said firmly, though fear twisted in his chest. "You're going to be okay." She looked at him with tired eyes, her lips trembling. No. Safe. More come. Daniel's throat tightened. She was right. This wasn't the end. Whoever sent the drones would not stop. But as he stared into her glowing eyes, something solid grew inside him. A promise. Then we'll fight them, he said quietly. Together. Liara blinked, then slowly nodded. Even weak, her eyes shone with trust. By dawn, the cabin was nothing more than ashes and smoke. Daniel stood in the clearing, the axe still in his hand, his body aching but his spirit unbroken. Liara stood beside him, her tall frame steady though her glow remained faint. Together, they watched the sunrise. Daniel sighed. Well, there goes. My 12-cent house. Liara tilted her head, confusion in her eyes. He chuckled softly. Don't worry. A cabin can be rebuilt. But you're worth more than all the cabins in the world. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. For the first time, Daniel realized that he wasn't just protecting her out of duty. Something deeper tied him to her now, a bond forged through fear, fire, and trust. And no matter what came next, he wasn't letting go. The morning air was thick with smoke. Ash drifted through the clearing like gray snow, and the last embers of the cabin hissed in the damp soil. Daniel stood quietly, staring at the blackened remains. What had once been his strange 12-cent purchase was now nothing more than charred wood and broken stone. He should have been angry. He should have been filled with regret for what he lost. But as he stood there gripping his axe, he realized something surprising. The cabin didn't matter anymore. It was just wood and nails. What truly mattered was standing beside him, Liara. She looked at the ruins with a heavy expression, her glowing lines faint and weak after the battle. Yet, even in exhaustion, she stood tall, her silver hair catching the soft light of dawn. When she turned to Daniel, her glowing eyes showed not despair, but hope. Daniel gave a small, tired smile. Guess I didn't buy a cabin after all, he muttered. I bought a war. Liara tilted her head at his words. She didn't fully understand, but she stepped closer and whispered one word she knew well. Friend. Daniel nodded. That was enough. The day passed quietly. They gathered. What little survived from the fire, an old pot, a knife, a half-burned blanket. Daniel packed them into his backpack. Liara helped, though her hands still trembled from weakness. She didn't complain. She wanted to stand beside him, even in small tasks. Daniel noticed that every time their hands brushed, she lingered a little, longer, as if reminding herself he was real. When the clearing was empty, Daniel looked toward the forest. We can't stay here. They'll send more. Liara's lips parted. She spoke slowly, carefully. Where? Go? Daniel sighed. He hadn't thought that far. The nearest town was miles away, and dragging a giant alien girl into it would raise more questions than he could answer. Still, the forest was no longer safe. He looked at her, at the faint glow of her markings. We'll find somewhere. Together. They began their journey at dusk, moving carefully through the dense trees. Daniel carried the supplies, while Liara walked behind, her tall frame blending strangely well with the shadows. Despite her size, she moved quietly, like a hunter trained to step where no twig would snap. The silence gave Daniel time to think. Only a week ago, his life had been normal. He worked odd jobs, lived simply, and searched for strange things online to pass the time. Now he was walking through the woods with an alien girl who trusted him with her life. Every so often, he looked back at her. She always met his eyes, and in those moments he felt something stronger than fear, responsibility, connection, even belonging. At night, they camped near a stream. Daniel built a small fire, keeping it low so it wouldn't draw attention. He cooked beans in the pot, and Liara ate beside him, her knees pulled close to her chest. When the stars appeared above, she lifted her gaze, her glowing eyes reflecting the night sky. She raised her hand and pointed at a bright cluster. "Home," she whispered. Daniel followed her gaze. "That's where you came from?" She nodded, her expression distant. Her voice was quiet when she added, "Far. Can't go." Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to say something comforting, but words felt too small. Instead, he handed her the crystal she had given him earlier, pulling it from his pocket. "This is a piece of your home, isn't it?" Her eyes widened slightly. She touched the crystal, then looked at him. Slowly, she pushed it back into his hand. "You keep you safe." Daniel closed his fist around it, his throat tight. She wasn't just giving him an object, she was giving him her trust, her bond. The days that followed were not easy. They moved deeper into the wilderness, avoiding paths and keeping low whenever. They heard strange buzzing. Twice they spotted distant red lights in the trees, but the drones didn't find them. During these days, Liara's English grew stronger. She practiced with Daniel constantly, repeating words until her voice smoothed. "Tree, water, sky," she would say. Daniel would nod. "Good. You're learning fast." Sometimes she tried longer sentences. "Daniel, strong." He chuckled. "Not really. You're the strong one." She shook her head firmly, touching his arm. "Strong. Here." She tapped his chest. Daniel fell silent. Her meaning was clear. On the fourth night, they reached a high ridge overlooking the forest. From there, Daniel could see lights of a distant town. Civilization. He hadn't realized how much he missed the sight of it. But as his eyes lingered, he felt a problem rising. How could he walk into that town with Liara? How could he explain her to anyone? Governments would take her, scientists would cage her, and those drones, they would find her faster than ever. He turned to her. "We can't go there. Not yet." Liara studied the glowing town far below, then nodded slowly. "Not safe." Daniel exhaled with relief. At least they understood each other. That night, as they camped near the ridge, Liara sat close to the fire, her silver hair falling across her face. She looked tired, but her glow seemed steadier now. Daniel sat beside her, sharpening his axe, though his thoughts were far away. Finally, Liara spoke, her voice soft. "Daniel, why help me?" The question caught him off guard. He lowered the axe, staring at the fire. Why was he helping her? He could have run the first night. He could have left her trapped in the loft and never looked back. But when he remembered her trembling voice saying, "Friend," he knew the answer. He looked at her. "Because you needed someone, and I was there, and because you're not just some alien, you're Liara." Her eyes widened slightly. "She whispered his name in," replied Daniel. The way she said it, soft and careful, felt like more than just a word. At dawn, the forest stirred again. Birds cried out sharply, fleeing into the sky. Daniel's instincts tensed. He stood scanning the trees. Then he heard it. The distant hum. "Drones," he muttered. Liara stood, her glowing lines brightening. She clenched her fists. But this time Daniel wasn't afraid like before. He felt ready. He looked at her. "We can't keep running forever. We'll fight if we have to. But we'll fight together." She gave a firm nod. Together. The machines never appeared that morning. The hum faded into the distance, leaving the forest still. But the moment had changed something between them. They were no longer just hiding. They were preparing for what was to come. As the sun rose higher, Daniel and Liara walked down the ridge, side by side. The crystal pulsed faintly in Daniel's pocket, warm against his chest. He touched it, thinking of the strange path his life had taken. He had started with nothing but a cheap cabin. Now he had something priceless, an unbreakable bond with a giant alien girl who trusted him completely. Whatever dangers lay ahead, Daniel knew one thing with certainty. He was no longer walking this path alone, and that truth gave him more strength than any weapon ever could.